takeoff that's the worst part. That's when the gas starts pouring over the wings and the engine
Murdock!
starts sparking. The whole thing will just... Well, believe me, you would never feel that one.
BA.
Hannibal, you should have drugged him.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Air sickness pills.
One of them stood on the set of Rocky III before any of this began, and Sylvester Stallone spotted him in a television bouncer competition and decided on the spot that he'd found his next villain. Another had been at the bottom of Hollywood's ladder for so long that he told a reporter he felt like he was living on Skid Row. And you know what's even crazier? The A-Team was dismissed by every serious television critic the moment it premiered in 1983. Too violent, they said. Too cartoonish. Too loud. And then 25 million Americans watched the pilot. For 4 seasons, 4 men in a black GMC van outran the military, built weapons out of whatever was lying around, and never once let the bad guy win. It was absurd. It was irresistible. And behind those 4 characters were real people living real lives that were messier, darker, and more complicated than anything that happened on screen. Here's what really happened to the faces that made you believe the plan was always going to come together. Number 1, George Peppard. As Colonel John Hannibal Smith. All 5 seasons. The man who was rescued by the plan. He was the one in charge. George Peppard played Colonel John Hannibal Smith, the cigar-chomping, disguise-wearing, eternally confident leader of the most wanted soldiers of fortune in America. Hannibal's catchphrase, "I love it when a plan comes together," became one of the most quoted lines on 1980s television. And George Peppard delivered it with the kind of authority that only comes from an actor who genuinely needed this to work. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because before the A-Team, George Peppard had been one of Hollywood's great almost men. He starred opposite Audrey Hepburn in Breakfast at Tiffany's in 1961. He was a genuine leading man. And then the alcohol took over. He drank for nearly 30 years. He was fired from Dynasty because producers couldn't work with him. 3 years passed without a single role. He told a reporter in 1983 that he felt like he was on Skid Row. "I was my own worst enemy," he said later. "Mine isn't a string of victories." But suddenly, something happened because in 1978, Peppard stopped drinking, completely. He spent years afterwards helping other alcoholics. And then the A-Team arrived, and Stephen J. Cannell fought NBC executives for weeks to get Peppard cast. He got the part. He pumped iron. He did his own stunts. He called it the best role of his career. But there is more, because after the show ended in 1987, Peppard kept working. He toured America, performing a one-man show about Ernest Hemingway. He appeared on the West End in London. He was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1992, a lifetime of 3 packs a day, catching up with him, and had part of a lung removed. He quit smoking. He kept going. On the 8th of May, 1994, George Peppard died of pneumonia in Los Angeles. He was 65 years old. He had just completed a new pilot the week before. Hannibal Smith always had a plan. George Peppard spent most of his life without one, and the plan that finally came together arrived just in time to give him the ending he deserved. But while George Peppard found his salvation in Hannibal's catchphrase, the man who became the show's biggest star arrived from a completely different direction. Bodyguard, bouncer, boxer, and what happened to him after the camera stopped was one of the most quietly moving stories in Hollywood. Number 2, Mr. T as Sergeant B. A. Baracus. All 5 seasons. The man who chose his own name. He was impossible to miss. Mr. T played B. A. Baracus, the gold-chained, mohawked, van-driving mechanic who pitied every fool who got in the team's way and refused to board an aircraft under any circumstances. B. A. was the muscle, the heart. The reason children all over the world were asking their parents for gold chains for Christmas in 1983. But you know what's even crazier? The name Mr. T was not a stage name. It was a legal decision. Born Lawrence Turode on the south side of Chicago, the youngest of 12 children, he changed his name as a young man specifically so that the first word out of anyone's mouth would be Mr. Growing up black in 1950s Chicago, he had watched the men in his family veterans. Hard workers be called boy by people who didn't respect them. The name was a demand for dignity. So when I was 18 years old, when I was old enough to vote, he once said, I said I was old enough to be called a man. But here's where it gets really interesting. because Sylvester Stallone discovered Mr. T in 1980 on a television competition called America's Toughest Bouncer. He cast him as Clubber Lang in Rocky III. The line, "I pity the fool," which became his trademark forever, was never actually said in the A-Team. It was a Rocky III line. Television just borrowed it and never gave it back. But suddenly, something happened, because in 1995, Mr. T found a lump while removing one of his earrings. A biopsy revealed a rare T-cell lymphoma. "Can you imagine?" he said later. "Cancer, with my name on it, personalized cancer." He underwent chemotherapy for 6 years. He emerged in remission, and with a faith so deepened that he said the illness had changed the foundation of how he lived. "I used to say, 'I believe in God,'" he said. "After cancer, I started saying, 'I depend on God.'" In 2026, Mr. T is 73 years old. He made a rare public appearance recently at the funeral of civil rights leader Reverend Jesse Jackson in Chicago, dressed in a stars and stripes outfit, gold chains still in place. He still works out. He still posts videos on social media. He is still, unmistakably, exactly himself. He is B.A. Baracus pitied every fool who underestimated him. Mr. T spent his whole life making sure no one ever got the chance. But the most unexpected post-a-team story belongs to the man who almost wasn't in the show at all because Dwight Schultz was cast as Murdock, then told he was being written out, and only kept his job because test audiences refused to let him go. Number 3. Dwight Schultz as Captain H.M. Howling Mad Murdock. All 5 seasons. The one who designed his own madness. He was the one you couldn't predict. Dwight Schultz played H.M. Howling Mad Murdock, the certifiably insane pilot who had to be broken out of a mental hospital every time the team needed air transport, and who filled the missions with accents, delusions, and a rotating cast of imaginary friends. Murdock was the show's secret weapon, the character audiences kept coming back for. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Schultz almost lost the role before it began. During early production, the decision was made to write Murdock out of the show. Test audiences saw the pilot and responded so strongly to the character that producers reversed course immediately. He designed all of Murdock's t-shirts himself. He called it his consistent contribution to the series. But there is more, because Dwight Schultz was a serious stage actor before the A-Team. 15 years of classical theater, Broadway, the West End. He won the Drama Logue Award for a production starring Charlton Heston. When the A-Team ended, he didn't walk away from craft. He took it in an unexpected direction, becoming one of the most sought-after voice actors of his generation. Reginald Barclay in Star Trek, The Next Generation. Dr. Animo in Ben 10. Mung Daal in Chowder. Dozens of video games. A career built entirely in recording booths, invisible but everywhere. But suddenly something happened that surprised the people who remembered him only as Murdock, because Schultz became a prominent conservative political commentator, hosting radio programs and podcasts, writing essays, and speaking at events. It was a side of him that had nothing to do with any character he'd ever played. In 2026, Dwight Schultz is 78 years old, still voicing characters, still outspoken, still, by all accounts, one of the most technically gifted actors nobody can quite place. Murdock's madness was always a performance. Dwight Schultz turned out to be one of the sanest, most deliberate people on the set, a man who knew exactly what he was doing every single time. But the 4th member of the original team, the smooth-talking, scheme-running Face, came to the A-Team already carrying a cult following from another beloved show, and what happened to him after became one of the more unusual second acts in television history. Number 4. Dirk Benedict as Lieutenant Templeton, Face Peck. All 5 seasons, the one who wrote his own story. He was the charmer. Dirk Benedict played Templeton Face Peck the conman, the smooth talker, the man who could walk into any situation and walk out with exactly what the team needed. Face was the one who made the impossible logistics of every mission happen. And Dirk Benedict played him with the kind of easy confidence that makes acting look effortless. But you know what's even crazier? Dirk Benedict arrived at the A-Team already a cult icon from Battlestar Galactica, where he'd played Starbuck. He was the fan favorite before Face was ever written. The A-Team simply gave a new generation a new reason to love him. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Dirk Benedict made a decision in the mid-1970s that had nothing to do with acting. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He refused conventional treatment. Instead, he adopted a strict macrobiotic diet and attributed his recovery to it. He wrote a memoir about the experience, Confessions of a Kamikaze Cowboy, that became a significant book in alternative health circles. Whether the diet cured the cancer or whether the cancer resolved on its own, he was convinced. He has lived by those principles ever since. But there is more, because after the A-Team, Benedict kept working television, theater, writing. He appeared in the 2007 British series Celebrity Big Brother. He made a cameo in the 2010 A-Team film alongside Dwight Schultz. He wrote a second book, And Then We Went Fishing. He directed and co-wrote a film. He became, quietly, one of the most interesting people to ever come out of 1980s action television. In 2026, Dirk Benedict is 81 years old, still sharp, still working, still doing exactly what he wants. Face always had an angle. Dirk Benedict turned out to be the one member of the A-Team who never needed a plan, because he'd been writing his own story long before any producer handed him one. The A-Team was never supposed to be taken seriously. Critics called it violent, shallow, a show for people who didn't want to think. And 25 million Americans watched the pilot and decided that thinking was overrated. Behind that black van were real people. A man rescued from alcoholism by a role he almost didn't get. A boy from Chicago who demanded dignity with his own name. A stage actor who found his second life in a recording booth. And a cancer survivor who decided that what kept him alive was worth more than any role. One of them kept going until a week before the end. One of them carried a cancer diagnosis for decades and came out the other side still posting workout videos at 73. And the show they made together that critics dismissed, that Emmy voters largely ignored, is still streaming, still watched, still beloved 43 years after that pilot aired. There is only one original A-Team, and now you know what it really cost the people who made it.